Assalamu alaikum, Mushahid Saab. Thank you so much for joining us. Mushahid Saab, Pakistan appears to have played a major role in mediating the 2-week-long ceasefire between United States and Iran. And it was announced just hours before Trump's, deadline for Iran. So how significant do you think this moment is diplomatically for Pakistan?
I think it's one of Pakistan's finest hours in diplomacy. And it reminds me of what we did in the historical context 50 years ago when we had this tremendous breakthrough between China and the United States brokered by Pakistan. We served as a bridge, which was a game changer in the Cold War in the 20th century. And now when the world and our region particularly was on the brink of catastrophe, Pakistan managed to bridge the gap and bring the two warring parties to the conference table, which shows that they have total confidence in Pakistan's ability to be an honest broker and a bridge builder. So I think it's a moment of great satisfaction and a moment of national pride for Pakistan and its people, that Pakistan today is a pivotal player in geopolitics, in geoeconomics, and also a major Muslim middle power that is playing a role for peace, security, and stability in the most volatile region in the world.
So Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif just announced that there's going to be, he's invited in Iran and the US for talks in Islamabad this Friday. How realistic is that? Do you think could Islamabad realistically host the next phase of talks between Washington and Tehran on Friday? And if so, then who should we be expecting in Islamabad from both the sides?
Of course, Pakistan is the host. Pakistan is the pivotal player for peace, and Pakistan is the one which has taken the initiative to bring Washington and Tehran together on the same platform. So it's but natural that Islamabad should host this meeting. And we don't know the names as yet, but there are, of course, going to be high-level delegates from both sides. And it's truly historic because everybody was saying that we've reached the brink, and after that, it's going to be the deluge. But that has been averted, thankfully, and both sides can gain some element of a victory of sorts for their respective constituencies. Trump can tell his mega crowd that, okay, I've managed to avert a disaster, and I will try to have an opening of the Strait of Hormuz, although the Strait of Hormuz was already open before the war. And Iran, of course, can rightly claim that as the victim of aggression, as the weaker protagonist, they stood firm in defiance. They stood up to the bullying of the two nuclear powers, Israel and America, and they didn't blink. And it was they had the upper hand. So there's definitely cause for celebration in Tehran, as it happened last night. So it's win-win for both sides, and Pakistan also has managed to rope in China. So we have that ingress impact in Riyadh, Cairo, Turkey, Ankara, Tehran, Beijing, and Washington concurrently. And I think that's saying a lot, because in these troubled times, it's important that people be talking to each other rather than shooting at each other.
Before I get into talking about the Pakistan's ties with Iran and the Gulf countries, I want to talk about the ceasefire a little bit more, because this ceasefire is for about 2 weeks, and it does appear fragile, because considering the US president, he keeps changing his mind. He tweets something in the morning, and then, a few hours later, he changes his mind. So do you think, considering all of that, do you think this is a genuine pathway for negotiation, or do you think this is a tactical pause in the conflict?
I'm basically an optimist by nature, and I always see the glass as half full. And this is what I told different talk shows last night when they were saying you are very relaxed and you're optimistic. I said that I think that a way forward can be found. And I also mentioned that there'll be telephone calls being made from Rawalpindi last night, and I'm glad that they were successful. I remember a saying of Nelson Mandela. He said that it's always impossible till it's done. And I think that this seemed impossible last night till it was done early this morning. So I feel that there is a glimmer of hope, because the stakes are very high. Both sides have sized each other, and America has realized that might is not right. Actually, right is might. Their military operation against Iran was actually an abject failure. And Iran also feels that since they are willing to accept most of the terms they had already agreed upon, and this was a war imposed on them, Iran is willing and ready to deal because to avoid further death and destruction of their own people, because there has been a lot of devastation in the war. And all around, the war is not just about between Iran and US and Israel. It's a war about the global economy. It's a war about global energy. And the stakes couldn't be higher because of Strait of Hormuz. And I feel that there are grounds for cautious optimism that the next 2 week period would be decisive in really ensuring some semblance of durable peace and stability and security in our region.
Mushahid sir, Israel has also reportedly, agreed to pause operations as part of the ceasefire. But we've seen Israel violate ceasefire agreements with Gaza and Lebanon. Do you think Tel Aviv, particularly this extreme right-wing government of Netanyahu, will fully respect the ceasefire, or do you think they would try to spoil the peace deal between Iran and US?
So you should be very clear where Netanyahu is coming from. This is Netanyahu's war. And even today I was reading in the New York Times that it was Netanyahu and his Mossad chief who briefed Trump on 11th of February, 2 weeks before the war, that they egged him on and said, we will sort out the war in a jiffy with the Iranians. We'll take out the leadership. And then soon after that, the people will come out in the streets of Tehran and there'll be a regime change engineered by the attack by the Americans and the Israelis, and to which Trump eagerly signed on, given the assurances by Netanyahu. So Netanyahu is basically the gangster of the Middle East. He's also a liar, and he's also a war criminal. So he knows that if the war ends and there's peace, then he'll probably end up in jail, either in Israel or he's already wanted by the International Criminal Court. So I do not expect him to respect international covenants, respect international law, or respect any agreements. However, having said that, don't forget that after all, it's Israel is an extension of US foreign policy in the Middle East, and Israel cannot survive or sustain itself without American support. So if Trump is on board, and it's also about Trump's political future, this war, because he was caught in a quagmire and he wants to extricate himself from this quagmire, I expect that Trump will try to leash Netanyahu. And I agree, Netanyahu is a spoiler. He's already said something negative about Lebanon, that it's not part of the portfolio, although Lebanon is part of the arrangement. It's been documented in the 10-point plan, which Trump has said is workable basis for agreement. And it's also documented in the tweet by the Pakistan Prime Minister.
So, like you said, Netanyahu is a spoiler. At this moment, because Trump is also looking towards midterms, which are going to happen in a couple of months. But how much of an influence do you think Washington realistically have on Israel? Because Trump has, even in the past spoken about stopped kind of Netanyahu from bombing Lebanon and Gaza, but those warnings have just been ignored.
Of late, I think the influence has been the other way around. It's the Israeli lobby and Netanyahu who have been calling the shots and who have been planning and conceiving and executing this kinds of wars of aggression last year as well and this year as well against Iran. So it's been Netanyahu in the driving seat. I think there will be a role reversal because of the setbacks that this war has had for Trump personally, because as you said rightly, the midterms are coming up, his political future is at stake, and already his ratings are very low, and the American people are not with him in this war. And so he is at a dead end, and for him, his own survival is going to be paramount, rather than permitting Netanyahu to undermine his position or be a spoiler. So I expect Trump to be decisive in leashing Netanyahu for the greater good of his own political future, for the greater good of the region, and also for the greater good of the peace agreement that Pakistan is trying to broker.
Mushahid Saab, now let's talk about Pakistan and Pakistan's ties in the region. Historically, we have maintained close ties with Saudi Arabia and also the Gulf states. And while we share a long border and a complex relationship with Iran, how delicate do you think is this balancing act during the mediation?
I think it's not easy, it's very tricky, but we have managed to maintain a good balance because of a principled position. Now, let me give two examples of that last night. For example, when the Iranians attacked the Al Jubail petrochemical complex in Saudi Arabia, we condemn that. Just as we condemn the US-Israel aggression against Iran. Because aggression is aggression. Whoever commits it's a violation of a country's sovereignty. It's a violation of international law. But when we did that on the issue of Iran versus Saudi Arabia, when the same evening yesterday, there was this UN Security Council resolution, which was tabled, and Pakistan is member of the UN Security Council, and this resolution was one-sided. It only criticized Iran without condemning the root cause, which is the US-Israel aggression. And it talked of opening the Strait of Hormuz. And we should know the Strait of Hormuz is a consequence, not the cause of the conflict. It emerged after the war, as it was opened before the war, and it was a war that caused its closure to some extent. So in that context, we abstained, and Russia and China vetoed the resolution, so the resolution didn't pass. But Pakistan showed its good intent and its sincerity to peace and maintaining an even balance based on principles, that we did not endorse a one-sided anti-Iran resolution in the UN Security Council, while at the same time criticizing Iran for what they did against Saudi Arabia. So that kind of balance has been tricky, but we have maintained it because we have been principled, we have been morally correct, we have been legally right, and that's the way forward. And that's why we have credibility in Tehran at the highest levels of leadership, and we have credibility in Washington, D.C. at the highest levels of leadership, apart of course, from China and Turkey and Saudi Arabia in any case, which has been there long-standing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've been getting gratefulness and thankful, tweets from Arabshi and even Trump. But do you know if Islamabad faced any pressure from its Gulf partners, while engaging with Iran diplomatically? Because we did recently also return some amount of debt that we owe to UAE, which came out of nowhere.
Pressure or no pressure, the fact remains that all of them wanted the war to end, because this was not their war, and the war was damaging them. Look at the UAE, for example. They have been devastated. The Gulf brand that they built up so assiduously in the last 3-4 decades has been hit for a six. Fun in the sun, Dubai Shopping Festival, Dubai a haven for tourists, for investors, for retirees, for rich people, for millionaires and billionaires. It's all devastated, and this was all up in the air. And I feel that the Gulf countries should be thankful to Pakistan for managing to broker this very difficult ceasefire, because it has staved off further destruction. It has ended a war that could have been more debilitating and more destructive for the Gulf economies, who have the most to lose anyway because of their proximity to the war zone.
Absolutely. So I would wrap this up by asking you one last question about Pakistan and Iran, because these two countries were neighbors and we've had a long history and a complex relationship. Do you think this mediation and Pakistan's effort to end the war could actually improve Pakistan and Iran's relationship going forward? Also considering the part that India has been playing in this equation.
Let me make it very clear that as a person who has followed Iran very closely as a journalist and as a politician, as a parliamentarian, as a minister, Pakistan-Iran relations for the last 40 years, since the revolution, this is the highest point of the Pakistan-Iran brotherhood. The relations between Tehran and Islamabad have never been so close, so intimate, so trusting as they are today. And I think that one manifestation of that is the fact that Iran has readily agreed to Pakistan being the interlocutor and the mediator with Washington, D.C. So I feel that, yes, the relationship has in the past been checkered. It's been difficult. There have been ups and downs. But we are in the same boat, so to speak, because we are neighbors, 900 kilometers of border. We share a common heritage. Persian language, Islamic heritage, common bonds. Iran was the first country to recognize Pakistan in 1947. Pakistan was the first country to recognize the Islamic Revolution in 1979. So our destinies are inextricably intertwined, and both Pakistan and Iran know that. And I feel that this current scenario, where Pakistan has played a pivotal role for peace, would be a game changer, force multiplier for promoting and taking Pakistan-Iran relations to a higher pedestal at all levels. And I think that's very good news for our relationship and good news for the region.
Thank you so much, Mushahid, for joining us today.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much, and good luck to you.
Thank you.